And welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland preview podcast ahead of this weekend's game against West Bromwich Albion at the Hawthorns. The lads got back to winning ways at the weekend as Trey Hume blasted us to a 1-0 win over Millwall, but a potential playoff rival will present a little bit of a tougher weekend opponent, I think. And as always, when we suit up against the Baggies, we invite the excellent Chris Hall from AlbionAnalysis. You normally join us. How are you? You lovely, lovely man.
Thank you very much, mate. Yeah, I'm all right. Happy to be talking to you. Not so happy to be talking about the Baggies at the moment because all is not that rosy in the Hawthorns garden at present.
Let's get straight to it. 1-0 defeat in Norwich. Look, it doesn't look that bad on paper. I'm used to getting beat at Norwich. Norwich are like the team where I think there's green shoots of recovery, but they're not quite going to be the playoff team they were last year because they're kind of changing things a bit. But in the context of your season, you want playoffs, going to Norwich, getting beat 1-0. What went wrong there?
Um, Look, Mowbray said after the game that he felt it was one of, if not the best displays under his stewardship. I have to say, I rather strongly question that. I think that between the two boxes, we were really, really good, and we were comfortably the better team. We dominated the ball. We had 61% possession, but when Mowbray's saying things like that, you would expect us to be dominant in front of goal as well. And he pointed to the fact that we had a lot of shots. We did, I think 16, I think it was. But we didn't have a shot from open play from less than 16 yards until the 85th minute, which kind of tells you what you need to know, really. We had a lot of low-value shots from long distance, one that Angus Gunn let through his hands and could easily have squirmed into the back of the net. But it would have been more luck than anything else. It always is when you're shooting from that far out. And that's kind of been our perennial problem over the last few games, really, is that we're not shooting from high value areas. We're not creating a lot inside the penalty area. Adam Armstrong just cannot get on the ball inside the box. He had 3 touches inside the penalty area against Norwich, and we've been talking on our pod about his numbers inside the box for weeks. And look, this is a guy who scored all of his goals inside the 18-yard box last season for Southampton, and he's just not getting touches and shots off in the box, and it's a problem. And you're seeing him drop deeper and deeper and deeper. So, look, we and in terms of why did we lose the game? Because we make a massive mistake right at the end with a very good striker, Josh Sargent, on the end of it. John Swift, probably out of frustration, tries to force a pass that wasn't really on. But even then, there's no real danger. And Mason Holgate, inexplicably, rather than tracking the run of Josh Sargent, who he's got 3, 4, 5 yards on, decides to move towards the ball carrier Nunez and lets Sargent run off his shoulder and go in behind, and they score off the back of it. So it's a frustration that we dominate a game like we did, and I mean, I've seen tweets from Norwich fans that even they're humble enough to admit that they were largely outclassed on the day and won it with one moment towards the end. Although it wasn't one moment, they got Sargent in one-on-one in the first half. And this is kind of where we're at the moment, that we're the better side largely in games. But on the flip side of that, we're not creating any big chances, really, which means we're struggling to score goals. And we're not really racking up any sort of an XG value or anything like that. And teams against us, whilst they're not creating loads, when they are creating, it seems to be quite big chances. Like Joe Wildsmith had to make a one-on-one save in that game as well, and you're going to lose games, really. If we've got away with it a little bit over the last couple of games. Joe Wildsmith made 2 really big one-on-one saves. I would wager if we let Isidore go through one-on-one on Saturday, that the result will not be the same. And we've got to be the ones creating big chances. We've got one of the best strikers, if not the best striker in the division. We're not making him look particularly good at the moment, and we've got to find a way to play to him. We've got to find a way to make him dangerous again. At the moment, we look very good on the ball. We look nice and tricky in wide areas, but it's all talk and no trousers, to be honest, Graham. There's nothing there.
It's interesting you say that because, like, the way you were describing it, I love Tony Mowbray, but there was a period last season where it felt like that. I can pick out Swansea away. Oh, okay, they were down to 10 men. Plymouth away, and that kind of is what led to the end of his tenure at Sunderland. But when you look at, we'll get into Mowbray and Corbran and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to lie, I had you down for a draw on my coupon, so I was like, oh, brilliant, because I think you'd not lost in about six or something beforehand without actually winning many. But there's
We were only
definitely
3 minutes away from it.
I was close, but sadly there was quite a few teams that let me down, mate. But looking at the table, we discussed this last preview show. There's a pattern with West Brom. You're hard to beat. You don't get beat that often, but you draw a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
18, I think, in total, highest in the league. Is there a pattern with West Brom where you're good enough to, be where you're at, but you're not winning enough to make it a feasible playoff / promotion push?
I mean, look, in terms of what we're capable of this season, it's really hard to know because who in this division is particularly consistent. Even the four of you towards the top, and you're kind of almost in a league of your own, to be honest, because you're 9 points off the top three, and you're 13 clear of fifth. Fourth is almost its own little league in a bizarre sort of a way. But the top three, I mean, Leeds have started dropping points out of nowhere all of a sudden, and then you've got the teams who are chasing the playoffs, and from Coventry downwards, can you call any of them truly consistent? Not really. So, and we haven't lost to any of the top four either this season. You're our last hurdle to clear in terms of having that record completely. Granted, they're all draws. Every single one of them has been a draw. We're seven draws against the top four. If we draw with you on Saturday, we make it a perfect eight. So I wouldn't look at it and say we can't achieve anything this season, because if we get in there, we haven't been beaten by anybody in the top four, assuming that you don't beat us on Saturday. But that's just the championship for you. No disrespect to yourselves, Sheffield United, Leeds, or Burnley, but I don't view you in quite the same way as I viewed Southampton, Leicester, Leeds, and Ipswich last season. I do think they were more dominant than the four teams at the top are this year, and I don't see the absolute blowing away of the teams who finished fifth and sixth that happened last season happening this season in the playoffs, because I don't think the gulf is quite the same. But it's just can we be good enough to get in there and give ourselves a chance? Because as you say, we don't lose a lot, we don't win a lot, we just draw a lot, and that might be enough to nick something in the playoffs. You honestly don't know. The important thing is that we don't get absolutely dominated like we did last season by Southampton, and I don't see that happening this time around, because we've gone toe to toe with Leeds and Burnley in recent weeks, and frankly made them both look pretty average. And there's a strong argument to say we could have come away from both games with all 3 points. So we're a funny side, but then at the same time, we go and make Norwich look like a good defensive side when all the data shows that they're absolutely not. We go and make Hull look like a really, really decent side, which, to be fair, they've been a bit more of late. But then they're still a team battling relegation. We've made a number of sides that really aren't that good look quite good. Made a Blackburn side without a manager look like absolute world beaters. Gave Plymouth their first win since God's dog was a pup. We're a weird side. No, I honestly don't. I don't know. I don't know what'll happen on Saturday. The smart money says that it will just peter out to a stalemate of a 1-1. But then there's every possibility within that we go and really show up, and Adam Armstrong gets a couple of early goals and he starts showing his form, and we win 2-0, just as much as there is that you canter to a 3-0 win. Albion are probably the single most unpredictable team in the division at the moment.
I was going to say, does it bode well for you? Like, because I've looked over the last 2 months and gone, right, what stuck out most for me? You got a draw with Burnley, you got a draw with Leeds, and they were away draws. You've dropped points to Hull and Millwall. All right, Hull beat us, but like as you said before, I echo everything you said. I saw Millwall on Saturday. wasn't massively impressed, didn't think they had much about them. But in a roundabout way, does that bode well for that playoff push, saying that you get into it, that you can get points off, quote unquote, the better teams?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it shows that because look, last season when we went into those two games against Southampton, we had got we got beaten rather unluckily at St Mary's, but to be honest, that was before Russell Martin had really got the mojo going with them, and they were still a little. There was a lot of question marks over them when we played them early on in the season, and we played them in the Hawthorns towards the end of the season, and they absolutely blew us away. I mean, it was one of those where it could have been a lot more than it was quite early doors, and to be honest, I didn't go into the two games against Southampton holding out a great deal of hope because I knew we weren't as good as them. And they showed it across the two games, and particularly that second game at the Hawthorns. That I just knew this was a team that probably had our number. I don't necessarily feel that way about any of the four up there this season. Sheffield United seem to be able to turn out results and look like they may get automatic promotion. Yet I've not been terribly impressed with them. And in both of the draws we've had with them, I thought we were the better team and should have won. Burnley bossed us at our place, but were toothless as they were earlier in the season. And then at their place, I thought we did an absolute number on them. And Mikey Johnston hits the crossbar with a deflected shot. If that doesn't take a nick on the way through, we probably go home with all 3 points. And similarly with Leeds, played them second game of the season. Can't really read much into that. But at their place, Tom Fellows races clear in injury time and takes a really bad touch towards Joe Rodon. And if he doesn't do that, if he keeps the ball away from Rodon, he probably canters through and scores. And again, we go home with the points. I mean, to be honest, our performance at your place was just an odd one. I mean, it was an absolute backs to the wall effort. But to be fair, we had no blooming defenders. We went into the game. We were going to start Diakite at centre half, and then he got injured in the warm up. So we had to put a half-fit Carl Bartley in there, who only managed 45 minutes before he had to be substituted. And we finished with Uros Ratcic at centre-half, who isn't even very good in his own position of central midfield, let alone centre-half. So it wasn't a really real surprise that we did what we did at your place and just tried to grind out the 0-0. And to be honest, did it really well. I thought we threw ourselves in front of absolutely everything. And okay, there was only one team trying to win the game, and it wasn't us, and I completely accept that. But sometimes you just have to accept that the opposition are an awful lot better than you in that moment, and that you have to defend it out, and you have to see the game out on an even playing field with an actual defense to pick. Do I think we would do that against you? No, probably not. I don't think we would have that kind of inferiority complex, but I think we did what we had to at the Stadium of Light. I don't think there was a choice in the matter, given the players we had missing. I don't think there's anywhere near as much to fear out of the top four this season as there was last season. You are all clearly good sides, and you are all clearly better than the rest of the division. You wouldn't be as far clear as you are without that, if that weren't the case. But are you? And if I look at the two teams that finished third and fourth and made the playoffs last season, are any of you as good as Leeds or Southampton were last season? No, probably not for me. And I don't think I don't see you. You might make the playoff final, whoever finishes third and fourth. It might be third v fourth in the playoff final. But do I see it being due to an absolutely rampant victory? 3-1 with Southampton. I can't remember how many Norwich got stuffed by, but it was quite four. Yeah, I don't see it being as cut and dried as it was last season.
You started the season with Carlos Corbran, and we discussed him before. Clearly a very highly rated manager, and whilst I'm more interested in the man that replaced him for obvious reasons, we'll start with him first. We did chat in the last preview show, and I can't remember the exact words, but you were a big fan of him, and you were concerned that you were going to lose him to a bigger job. With all due respect to West Brom, that happened. He got a very good job. But when it happened, it was a little bit random. He was linked to like the Southampton job, and I thought, well, is that much of a jump? I mean, look at where Southampton are now, which is also another terrifying prospect that Southampton were quite good last season and have 9 points in the Premier League. But can you run us through Corbran's time, or well, not his time, like his end at the Hawthorns, how that came to pass, and why he kind of not decided to chuck it because it's a good team that he went to, but ultimately, if I was a West Brom fan, I'd probably be a bit cheesed off.
No, I don't think we were, to be honest. And I think, look, first of all, he's an unbelievable manager. You only have to look at what he's done at Valencia. He came into them with them bottom of the table, and since he joined, only four teams in La Liga have picked up more points than Valencia. I mean, what more do you need to know about him than that? I don't think we were annoyed. I think we probably would have been if he'd gone to Southampton. It's always hard to know how much we're in a lot of these links. I think there probably was quite a bit in that. I think he'd reached the end. I think he felt like this season. I think he wanted to see us go to the next level, and then he had to do it very. He had to do everything very cheaply in the summer. We had to bring in a lot of players who were, not were pretty bang average. I mean, not really, not good enough for this league. Frabotta's barely played. Devante Cole has barely played. Uros Racic was clearly not up to it. He had to do a lot of cheap deals, and then he got a little bit of money at the end of the window to do Mikey Johnston. Um, but then I think he kind of wondered where the light at the end of the tunnel was, and whether his stock might fall in the future. And I don't think you can blame Carlos Corbran for thinking like that. We all know in this in football how a manager can be absolutely flavour of the week one week, and then be considered bang average or awful the next. Like Graham Potter went from the next England manager to being touted for championship jobs in the space of what, 6 to 12 months. So I think as a manager you have to cash in while the chips are on the table at the end of the day, while you've got them in your hand. You know what I mean? Like I don't think you can. I don't think you can wait until that perfect moment when it works. It works for you, but it also works for the club and everything like that. Christmas Eve was not the best time to do it. At 10 to midnight, that was not ideal. I grant you, with a game on Boxing Day away at Derby. But he's from Valencia. It's his hometown. Like, I honestly haven't seen any Albion fans kind of losing their head, and the timing wasn't brilliant. But then that's Valencia. That's when they came in for him. He couldn't really turn around to Valencia and say, "All right, guys, but let's get the busy Championship Christmas schedule out the way, and then we'll talk." They wanted him then, and it was now or never. And it's his hometown club. It's a chance to manage in La Liga. And let's be honest, this is Valencia, who are an absolutely massive club. I don't think you have to be as old as I am to remember Valencia and some really good sides in the Champions League. And being considered one of the top sides in Europe. And it's not inconceivable that they could get back there, or at least somewhere there or thereabouts. So yeah, I don't think anybody blames him for it. And I think he's an excellent manager. And to be honest, I think he was always going to go to a level above what we could offer, unfortunately.
I didn't know he was from Valencia, so that makes a lot more sense. But I mean, yeah, I think you summed it up quite well. But look, the man that replaced him, I don't think I expected it. I expected him to come back into football, maybe not going back to where he came from previously, but I think it's safe to say that everyone's delighted he's well and he's healthy first and foremost.
Mm.
And you'll have seen when he came out on the pitch at the Hawthorns, a lot of Sunderland fans were like quote tweeting that, commenting on it, because we really like the guy. Like in the main, there will be people who don't. Look, I don't speak for everyone, but I think as a whole, people really liked what Tony Mowbray brought as a man, as a coach, as a manager, and the style of football he brought. It just was, in my personal opinion, when he went the right time to go. Unfortunately, we just brought an absolute buffoon in after him. But by the by. But if like I really like Tony Mowbray, but if in 10 years' time, 5 years' time, he came back when we're in the middle of like a promotion push or whatever it may be, I'm not too sure because I always feel like it's not the right thing to do it the second time around. There was quite a bit of time between the time he left West Brom and came back, to be fair. Very rarely does that happen. But how do West Brom fans feel about that? Because it felt like yous were happy, but I imagine there was some that were like, does it always work second time around?
I think initially, at the point he was appointed, I think there was a big split between those who remembered him the last time and those who were too young to do so. I think those who remembered that Tony Mowbray team that won the championship, I think for a lot of us, unless you were old enough to remember the teams of the sort of 70s, I think for most of us, that's probably the best football we've ever seen at the Hawthorns. Yeah, I think if you can go back as far as the Ron Atkinson era, then that obviously trumps it. Seeing Laurie Cunningham and Cyril Regis and players like that in the team, obviously that's going to be better. But I think for those of us who like myself, born in 1983, can't go back that far. I don't think we've seen a better, more enjoyable team than the Tony Mowbray one that won the championship. So I think if you're old enough to remember that, I think most of us were pretty positive about it because it's the guy returning who gave us some of our fondest memories of watching our team. I think the younger ones were a bit like, why is this? Why have we gone for a bit of a championship journeyman? Especially as the person that the club very clearly initially wanted, and this is not to say they didn't want Tony Mowbray, but as I understand it, he hadn't quite had the all clear from whether it was the LMA or the doctors themselves. I don't think he'd had the all clear to return to work when we were initially going through the process. So I don't think Tony Mowbray could be a part of the initial process for those reasons. I think I don't completely understand it, but I think there was some sort of insurance thing that had to be done to say that he was fit and healthy and ready to return to work. So I don't think he could be a part of the initial process. And we were going to hire a guy called Raphael Vicky. Who the Swiss midfielder, actually remember him from his playing days as a bit
It's
of a
linked to us
combative.
in the summer. Linked to us in the
Yeah,
summer, Raphael Vicky. But I think someone tweeted it and they were obviously wrong. But yeah, no, there'll be Sunderland fans who know the name.
well, and look, he that all fell apart because I think a member of his coaching staff couldn't get a work permit or something like that, and he basically wanted two staff to come with him. One of them it was in Switzerland in a job, and he turned it down the opportunity to go. And I think the other one wanted to come but couldn't get the relevant work permit. So in the end, Vicky turned around and said no. And I think for some of them, it's always the same, isn't it? Like it doesn't seem to matter how much people know about players or managers, for that matter. When you see a sort of like a young fella with a good record over in Switzerland, and he's a dashingly good looking sod as well, Raphael Vicky. Especially the sort of the younger element of the fans, start getting very excited about that. And I imagine for those who weren't old enough to remember Tony Mowbray the last time, a guy who they would view as a championship journeyman perhaps was a bit of a disappointment for them. So I think it split the fan base between those who were old enough to remember him and those who weren't. Um, has it been all sweetness and light since he came back? No, absolutely not. And I think even those who were pro Mowbray when he came back have got a lot more question marks over him. I think the biggest problem he's got at the moment is his inability to get a tune out of Adam Armstrong, and that's confusing a lot of fans because he keeps. I mean, we called our pod this week the definition of insanity. That's what he seems to be doing with Adam Armstrong. Is he keeps playing him up front on his own, and he looks completely isolated, and we're getting no tune out of him. So I think there's a lot of questions for him to answer at the moment. All I would say to any Albion fans sort of massively questioning whether Mowbray has got it anymore, which I never quite know what the it is, to be honest with you, but people always ask whether he's got it anymore, is that we didn't exactly have a great start to his last tenure as Albion boss. We had a poor start, poorer than we've had this time around, and we only got into the playoffs on the final day by beating Barnsley 7-0. So but then he turned over 11 players in, 11 players out in the summer, and he turned us into a championship winning team. Now, I'm not saying he'll do that again, but what I'm saying is that until a manager has had a summer window, it's very, very hard to judge him with somebody else's players. And I feel like that's what's happening at the moment. That having been said, that defence of him being laid out, it isn't acceptable to get so little out of possibly the best striker in the league. I mean, the guy who had the most goal contributions in the league last season, anyway. So, which by virtue of that makes him somewhere in and around the best striker in the league last season, which means that he probably should be somewhere in and around the best striker in the league this season. And he looks a shadow of himself. So, I've got a lot of defences of Mowbray, and I think that people need to give him more time and more patience. But the one thing I can't defend him on is not getting enough out of Adam Armstrong, because frankly he is a player who is outstanding at this level, and we have to see that, and at the moment we're not.
Has he scored yet?
He scored two. He scored against Sheffield Wednesday on his debut with a very, very clever finish, and then his only other one is a penalty against QPR.
Thank fuck for that, because I thought it was going to go quite south and he was going to get his first goal against us. That would kind of tick all the boxes with him being from, the dark place. In terms of Mowbray, you talked before about the style of football he played in the best kind of football. I'll openly say, look, when we were in the Premier League and Phillips and Quinn were there, that was the best football I've ever seen because we were winning games. That's what I cared about. I liked the football under Sam Allardyce, percentage football. Get the ball to the fore, he will score goals. I liked it. But if I'm going to be like a football purist, the football under Mowbray was absolutely lush. Like I used to enjoy going to games and be like,
Mm.
oh my God, he's got these young players like Diallo, Roberts, absolutely torturing teams, and it just looks so nice to watch. And I was proud to watch it, and that was down to him. He changed that. We went from an Alex Neil team to a Mowbray team quite quickly, but it doesn't normally happen like that. I think he had players here that fitted into his ethos, young players that go and let them play, like he says, soft feet, all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
Has he had time to imprint that with West Brom yet? Because West Brom's team, you're not full of journeymen and hard workers, far from it, but you probably weren't full of like good young players in the way we were that season that could like look up to Tony Mowbray almost like an uncle or a granddad, if that makes sense. It's a bit of a different situation. Has he had time to imprint his style yet?
No. Um, the other thing he hasn't had is his best player, Josh
Mm.
Masher, and that's huge. Josh is without a doubt our best player for me. Like I don't, there's not a doubt in my mind. You only have to look at how much we've struggled without him in the team, and Mowbray hasn't had him available yet, and that's enormous. That's absolutely huge, and I think. And he's had a setback as well because we thought he'd be back for this game. And frankly, a front two of Maja and Armstrong against Sunderland has has only one outcome written all over it. To be honest with you, and we've been denied that. He took the boot off. It isn't healed up. He's had some pain. And he's had to go a little bit back to square one, I think. And Mowbray said realistically he might be back for the playoffs, but not much before. So I think that's part of it. I think, but then you can't just blame that. You have to find solutions around it. And the reality is that we are still playing some nice stuff between the boxes, but when we get it wide, you look up and 5'8" Adam Armstrong's in the middle. Well, you don't cross it then, do you? And like teams are not stupid against us either. They're defending a bit deeper against Adam Armstrong because you don't want the bloke running in behind you. You're not going to play a high line against Adam Armstrong. It'd be suicide. So Armstrong just finds himself drifting out to the left or drifting a bit deeper to pick the ball up, and in the end, he's the one trying to actually play the ball in behind the defence, which he did for one of our better chances against Norwich. But that's not really where you want him. You want him in the box, picking up bits and pieces. And for me, that means playing two up top. To be honest with you, and he actually keeps referencing his time at Sunderland, saying, "Look, I did really great things without a striker. I played Ahmad in that role and all this sort of thing." And it's like, yeah, but you haven't got Ahmad. I mean, look, we've
Oh, Ahmad.
yeah, well, look. There's
Oh,
there's a strong argument to say he's been Manchester United, probably outside Bruno Fernandes. He's probably been Man United's best player this season. Well,
class.
you know,
Unbelievable footballer.
but in the Championship, you haven't got Man United's second best player at West Bromwich Albion. So you're going to have to do something different. And Isaac Price looks a bloody good player, but he isn't Ahmad, and he's got to find a way of doing things a little bit differently. Has he had time to imprint himself on this team? No. And look, trying to unpick the rigidness of a Carlos Corbran team is like when you open a drawer and find a load of headphones in there and trying to untangle them all. It's going to be a bloody difficult thing, because we were unbelievably disciplined under Carlos Corbran, probably the best team at it in the league, which you saw at the Stadium of Light, to be honest with you. Like I say,
I agree.
With players who weren't defenders in defensive positions, and we still knew everything that we needed to do to get a result out of that game. That was Carlos Corbran. Mowbray doesn't want to play like that, and picking that apart is probably going to take a while. It's probably going to take quite a turnover of personnel as well. So that is part of it. But the other part of it is just recognise what it takes to get the best out of Adam Armstrong, or don't play him. Those are the two options for me.
I would prefer not to play, because I'm starting to sense a script here, and it's making me feel a bit sick. But
I don't know. I would as well. But then the player I'd like to see play ahead of him is Daryl DK, who also has a little bit of a history with you. So
how's he doing, by the way? Because he's had like a million injuries, hasn't he? Like, he's been basically dead for 2 years.
yeah, three really really long term injuries, all between 6 and 12 months. So it's been really really horrible for him, the poor guy. He's back. But he's they're very much taking baby steps with him. It's been 15 minutes here and 10 minutes there. It's treating very very gently. They clearly don't want a reoccurrence. I think we would. A lot of us would love to see him start a game, but ultimately you have to go by the sort of advice of the medical staff. If they say he's not ready, he's not ready. It's as simple as that. But I think even then, I think we'd like to see him come off the bench a little bit more as well, because it's not working with Armstrong, and Armstrong seems to get between 70 and 85 minutes, come what may. And by the way, I'm not having a go at Adam Armstrong. I think the problem is the way. I think he's doing everything he possibly can. I think it's the way we're playing to him, or not, as the case may be. I'm not criticising him, but the reality is, if it's not working with a player, then maybe you have to try something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope it continues not to work for him, because it's him, not because of anything to do with West Brom. Just going to be honest. Sorry. But going on to a risky question now, I've said that. Sunderland season so far. Like I said before, we're kind of in this. It's not in the best, because it's a good place to be. Like, fourth is brilliant, but the automatics are not going to happen. Like, if the automatics happen, I promise to stop doing the podcast, because it's not happening. Or I promise to continue doing it, depending on which way you sway. But I think it's quite clear that if we were to fall out of the playoffs, it's going to take a hell of a drop off. So the next 8 or so games, whatever we have left, is all about just momentum for Sunderland and making sure we're the best team, in the best form, in the best mood, with the most confidence going into those games. From the outside looking in, potentially you could be playing us in the playoffs, because that fifth place and sixth place is up for grabs, no problem at all. Say we finish fourth, you finish fifth. So naturally, you'd keep an eye on us. I've kept an eye on West Brom. I've kept an eye on Coventry, unfortunately, and stuff like that. What have you made of Sunderland's season so far?
I think you're a really exciting team. I think you're fun. I think you're a little bit inconsistent. But then that's going to happen. You've got a lot of young players in your team. I mean, you look down the ages of your team, and like the vast majority of your, I think you've only got one player, outfield player, other than Simon Moore, the goalkeeper, who's over 30. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. Like, the vast majority of your team is 25. In fact, I'm just looking at it now. You've actually only got 6 players who are over 25. I mean, that is absolutely crazy. So yeah, I mean, you're a really young side, and you're going to see that from you. I think you're exciting. I think you've got some of the best young players in the division. I don't think there's much denying that. I think I could rattle off the names: Hume, Neil, Isidore, Rig, Joe Bellingham, obviously. You've got some and Sirkin as well. You've got some top players. And but at the same time, you haven't got an awful lot of experience in there, and I think ultimately that's probably what's been the difference between top six and top two for you. Because I don't think you lack the talent to be in the top two, but you probably lack two or three 28, 29, 30, 31 year olds who have just been there and back and know exactly what it takes at the business end of the season to grind out results, to be horrible when you need to be horrible, and just do the right things. I think you've got a lot of idealistic young footballers, which for the neutral makes you wonderful to watch, and and as I say, you're fun, and it's so easy to get excited about the talent in your team. I mean, I could look through your list of players and probably and I mean, I think Rig and Bellingham are absolutely nailed on to play for England one day, but I could make an argument for a couple more potentially, who could be England internationals, which when you start saying that about a championship side sounds absolutely crazy, and when you start saying that about a championship side that's absolutely destined to finish fourth, you kind of wonder why they're not higher. But it's not. It doesn't take just talent to get out of this division. It takes a little bit of meanness, a little bit of savvy, a little bit of cleverness. You know what? Ipswich were last season's idealistic team, but what got them over the line was your Sam Morseys, it was your Kiefer Moores, it was it was those kind of bodies in there that in the end got them over the line. Even bringing in Lewis Travis, I think helped. A guy who knows the division very very well, and I don't think you've quite got that, but you're fun to watch. I think you can beat anybody on your day, but equally, you're also going to lack a little bit of game management. You're going to have those mad games where, like you had against Plymouth and stuff like that, where you think, where the hell has this result come from? And you had against Hull as well, because you just don't have the experience to deliver the consistency. But I tell you what, if you did go up through the playoffs, I'd kind of love to see, not that I want you to go up through the playoffs, but if, to be honest, if we don't go up, you kind of would be my pick, if we don't make the playoffs, because I'd kind of love to see what a team of people like Sirkin and Hume and Isidore and Job and Rig could do if you spent, I don't know, 50 million quid on two or three seasoned Premier League players to just drop in amongst them. And I have to say, I thought the rumours around Henderson coming back in January, that might have been a game changer for you if
Yeah.
you'd got that done. I think that could have changed your season. I think if Henderson had come back and been dropped into that midfield and that dressing room, I don't think we'd be sat here right now talking about Sunderland being as far off the top two as they are.
I actually fully agree with you on that. I've got many issues with Hendo and the things that he decided to do after he left Liverpool. But as a player, as a personality, as an experienced player, complete game changer. And we discussed that on the podcast at the time. And unfortunately, it appears that he's still quite a good player and doesn't quite fancy the championship just yet. But you never know. We never know. Hopefully, we don't need him. But if he wants to come for a relegation scrap next season, if we go up, like
Well,
he's
I think
welcome.
if you go up, I think it'll be nailed on. Because the bottom line is you don't want to end up spending sort of like 50 million quid on a few 30-year-olds on 70 grand a week. You want guys that you want at least one or two that you can bring in cheaply. And I know we're getting ahead of ourselves talking about what if Sunderland go up, but I personally think if you were to get promoted, it would be the single most no-brainer signing of in the history of the world.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. You mentioned a few players there, which largely I agree with all of them. In fact, I think I agree with all of them and everything you said, to be completely honest. But who's the player that impressed you most in that really, really dull 0-0 draw?
The player that's impressed me most all season for you is Joe Bellingham. The levels of him. he's just unbelievable. And I watched him. I actually went to the. I went to because England under 21s played at the Hawthorns
Yeah,
last week, so I went along to that. And I hate comparisons to his brother generally, and I understand why you would rather wear Job on his back than Bellingham. Completely makes sense to me. He doesn't need that pressure. But do you know what? Like, you watch the way he uses his body in that midfield, the way the way he sort of like moves the ball, the way he moves himself, the runs he makes, the way he picks it up deep and makes everything look effortless. Like, looks like he's got way more time than he's got. It's almost hard not to draw comparisons
it is. I
because
agree with you on that, to be honest.
a lot of the things that he does are very very comparable. There's a lot of things that are really really similar in the way he plays. So it is it would be a lazy comparison if it wasn't so accurate. I don't he's obviously nowhere near his brother's level at this moment in time, but there's if he has his brother's mentality, there's nothing to suggest he couldn't be. I look at it this way, right? He will be a Premier League player next season. Whether it's with you or not depends on whether you go up. He will be a Premier League footballer next season, or well, he will either be a Premier League footballer or he will play in an elite league in Europe. One of the two.
Pains me to agree again, but I mean, I'm a big Joe Bellingham fan, and I agree with a lot of the things you said. For good, a lot of you said towards something at the end there. I think you got a pretty good grasp of it, but that worries me a little bit because I know that you'll never go against your own team when I ask you for a prediction, so you might actually be accurate with this one. But you asked me last night. I said 2-2. The 2-2. It's not really been a result that Sunderland have had that much this season from memory. I can remember Plymouth at home a bit, but that was more to the fact that shit defending. I just feel like Tony Mowbray's teams don't really understand defending. I feel like that opens gaps. I feel like we've got the capability to score goals. I think, last week, give or take a penalty. If we get a penalty, it will not be 2-2 because we will miss it. But in terms of the way we played against Millwall, I felt like we carved them open quite a few times. I actually think you're going to be a little bit more open than that because that's just the way Tony Mowbray is. But I think as I said before, I can feel a little bit of a script, and you've got a decent striker there that knows where the net is at this level. So there's an argument to say it's going to be an entertaining game and a 2-2 draw for me.
Yeah, I think I mean look the the very obvious thing to go with is a draw because
Hmm.
we draw so many games. I mean blimey we've drawn 18 this season. That's three more than the next most. That's ludicrous. So the obvious thing to say would be I don't see it being 2-2 because that would involve us scoring two goals. And that would involve us having two shots from a reasonable position, which isn't happening at the moment. I think I'll go with 1-1, but if the team sheet comes out and he started Armstrong up front with DK, I'll be much more confident. And so I'm saying 1-1 unless it's two strikers up front, in which case I'm going with a 2-1 Albion win.
Fair play. I'll go with 2-2. But I fancy the opposite of what happened in the last game. I don't think either side's going to sit back and just kind of want to take a 0-0 draw. I don't see
No,
that being the case in the
to be fair,
slightest.
I don't think Corbran would have done that if we didn't have the problems that we had. To be fair to him, he was never going to be overly adventurous at your place, but at the same time, he wasn't normally that negative. It's just we had a guy whose knee was practically hanging off at centre half for the first half, and an attacking central midfielder at centre half for the second. I think he just had to give them a lot of protection.
Chris, as always, good to catch up, mate. Always enjoyed chatting with you. I wish you absolutely no luck at the weekend. And a bit more luck after that. I like to see Tony Mowbray do well. But if we do meet in the playoffs, I will revert back to my I hope you have no luck in the playoffs. But on a serious note, mate, it was good to catch up. Thanks for popping on.
Well, let's just hope we're chatting again ahead of a trip to Wembley, eh?
Yeah, that would be quite nice, mate. That would be quite nice, actually.